Hey everybody, welcome back to Historians of the Movies podcast. I am your host and creator, Jason Herbert, and every single week we are talking about movies and the histories behind them. And this week, I wanted to bring back on for you my dear friend, Lou Moore. Lou wrote a book a few years back called I Fight for a Living, Boxing and the Battle for Black Manhood, 1880 to 1915. It's really one of my favorite books on sports history that I can name. And I've been wanting to have Lou on the pod to talk about this book for a long time. Reached out to him the other day, so hey, let's do a film. And he said, let's do Diggstown. So this is a movie that comes out in 1992. I remember seeing a lot when it came out and hadn't seen it for a while. So today's conversation, we're talking about this movie with Lou Gossett Jr., James Woods, and a whole bunch of other folks. This is a real fun conversation about the history of black boxing, where it comes from, how it changes over the 19th century, and how boxing is portrayed in film. It's a real fun conversation with a really good friend of mine. So sit back and relax, because Diggstown is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. Dude, Lou Moore, welcome back to the pod, man. I'm stoked that you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. I'm glad to be on. Although, I'm just going to tell the listeners right now, we were just talking about Sinners before, and I wish I was invited. So, kind of hurt.
Well, you know what? I've gotten a lot of emails from friends who are like, sup, dude? Like, can I tell you, like, so I had Zandria Robinson on for Sinners. I had never met her before. Right. Uh-huh. And she was recommended to me by a mutual friend, Karen Cox, who does, the South and all that. She's like, I got the person for you. Right. And I'm talking to Zandria. And it was one of those things where instantly, I'm talking within 14 seconds, I was like, this is my new best friend. I just love her, man. She's so freaking cool. Well, you never know. Like, sometimes you talk to folks and it's fine. But it's sometimes you're just like, you know how it is. Sometimes you're struggling for a connection. And dude, I'm like, when can we have the next horror movie about the South? Like, is somebody doing the zombies thing? Like, when can I get her? Dude, she was so awesome. I freaking love her. And that movie, dude, I'm telling you, I can't stop talking about that film. Like, I think we're going to be teaching it for years.
It's I think people will teach it a lot. It's an awesome film. Like, since I went to Sac State as an undergrad and Ryan Coogler was there, we don't know each other. He was like, what a run for Sac State, me and him, right? They should let me, I was telling somebody, they should let me write the prequel with Smoke and Stack in World War I. Just let me do a World War I, because I want to know what they did. You know what I mean? It's all made up anyway, but
they were up to no good
where
in
they're
Paris.
Just killing everybody. Yeah.
There's that. I want the Remick movie when like Remick is a good guy, and then you get this sense that like they're I think the cool thing that like Coogler does with Remick is like there are threads of this likable dude in there where he's talking about like they force Christianity on us, and there's all this class stuff. He's the bad guy, no doubt, right. But there's this sense that there's once this dude who was a likable good man who got turned or something,
Yeah, and then even I know you study Native Americans, but the Choctaw stuff, even if it was like a split second, right, where they're hunting them down, and there was like, and then they're out, and then that girl, like the little girl who's still, I assume she's still alive. Oh, I'm spoiling it for everybody. I assume, right?
If you haven't seen Sinners by now, just go think about your life choices.
Right. No, for me, I was like, usually the last week of school when grades are in, I had that, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to get to work right now. I'll do my, usually that's when we'll get a lot of scholarship done, even though we're not getting paid at that point, right? Because that's not how our contract is. But so it's my movie time, like spring break and that. But I had said yes to a few things that I was still trying to finish up. And I was like, man, I got to get this knocked out so I can see it. So I just went. I think it was like Monday morning or Tuesday morning. I just finished what I had to do and just went in the morning. Yeah.
So I put like a quick review on TikTok, like right after I saw it, and I got like 500,000 views on that. I was like, what? And I'm not like a TikTok guy, right? Like I'm not like, I don't know. I don't speak that language, right? But I was like, I'll put this out there, but all these people are like, is it a scary movie? And I'm like, uh, not really. There are a couple jump scares that early on, but I don't even think about it as a vampire movie. It's a movie that has vampires,
Right.
but I'm like, the threat is from the clan and all of these other things surrounding it. Like the threat is already there before vampires start showing up. And then I keep seeing all these memes, like not like I just saw one about cornbread, about why did you have to go to the bathroom so far away from the juke joint? Like his wife is missing him now.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, I love that movie. We're gonna end doing that pod again. Like, so I'll just call you again when it's time to like do Sinners. We're doing annual Sinners review. All right, man. This is your second time back. You came on. We did Any Given Sunday for your most recent book, For the Great Black Hope, and now we're bringing the baby. We're bringing your baby back on, man.
Hey, right there. Yeah.
I read this on a plane, my friend.
Oh,
So
awesome.
you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Lewis Moore, sports historian. Was at Grand Valley State, going to start at Michigan State in fall. So pretty excited about that. And yeah, I don't know if they can see, but these are my 3 books behind me. And then it's just a mess. It's just books and cards. And so there's a couple Dominique Wilkins autos, and then some Doug Williams autos down there. And there's Hendon Hooker and stuff. So this is all some Kaepernick stuff. So that's it. That's all I do. I read, write, and waste my money on cards.
Yeah, so if you're listening in right now, Lou has what we refer to as cool stuff behind him. He's got like sports memorabilia, and I've got Star Wars and Legos over my shoulder, so you can tell who was the cool people in high school. It wasn't Jason. Dude, I'm so excited. When you and I first became friends on like social media, whenever it was ago, I became aware of your book, and I ordered it because I was like, I won't lie to you. When I first saw the cover of this thing, I was like, this thing is I will absolutely buy a book because of its cover. This thing is such a gorgeous book, and it's such a cool story, man. And I got to thinking, I was like, man, I know we did the most recent book, but I really wanted to come back and talk about your early work, talking about boxing and masculinity and all these things. And I thought, well, Sinners is out. Like, I guarantee Lou's going to want to talk about Creed and like, his boy Kugler. And then you were like, let's do Diggstown. I was like, what? So we're doing Diggstown tonight. Why? Of all the boxing movies, Lou, why Diggstown? Why are we going with this one tonight?
Because I'm old. Don't get me wrong. I like Creed. I like Creed 1 and 2. I really like 2. There's some sentimental reasons there. Not 3. 3's not good. But Diggstown is like what is that, 92? I'm like a young teenager. I watched it. I thought it was great back in 92. I was like, I watched it maybe a couple years ago. It was all right. And then it's like, you presented this opportunity. It's like, you know what? I want to watch it again. Just use this as an excuse to get up in the morning and watch it. And it's not bad. It's an hour and a half. So it's not like you're losing time or anything like that. So that's why, right? I could have easily done the Creeds and we could sit here. We can always come back and do Rockies though. There's always opportunities to do every single Rocky, even Rocky Balboa, which is a really underrated good movie. But yeah, Diggstown is just my era, right? I like 90s stuff.
You and I think are the same age, so I'm right there with you. I think I was 15 when this movie comes out, somewhere in that range, and so I saw this, and I remember watching like HBO like all the time, or like we had it on tape, like where we would tape it at my grandparents' house, and I would just watch it, and all that. So I was actually stoked, and this gave me a chance to go back and revisit this film as well. And there's so much here we can talk about boxing. You and I got to talk about our love of Honey Roy Palmer. I think we both probably share a mutual love of Louis Gossett Jr. for very real Iron Eagle related reasons.
R.I.P. Chappie, right? Yeah. Let me know when you want me to watch Iron Eagle. I'll do that too.
Do you want to do Iron Eagle? Let's go. I'm down for that. We're gonna put the boys together for Iron Eagle.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna have to do the soundtrack. I'm not even kidding. We're gonna do Iron Eagle. All right, let's jump into this though. This film comes out in 92, and I was looking, Lou, at like the other films that come out in 92 was like this big year for sports movies, man. I was looking at some of the list of the films that come out in 92, right? You've got A League of Their Own, The Cutting Edge, which like everybody loved. We did that on the watch party recently, and everybody lost their mind. White Men Can't Jump, The Mighty Ducks, Gladiator, which was the Cuba Gooding Jr. boxing movie,
Oh, I
right?
was like, yeah.
Um,
Street fighting, yeah.
yeah, right. Exact right. It was a big year for sports movies. Like, do you recall that like going on, or like what does that say about like '92? Why are these sports movies hitting back then?
Yeah, that's weird. Because I mean, sports are great, and sports movies are good, and you know what? The one thing that they all have, and most of them have in common, even I guess League of Their Own, is they're underdogs, right? We love underdog movies, and I think it's an easy thing for studios to kind of recreate, right? Like kind of post. I mean, we mentioned it earlier, but post Rocky, and you know that's for a lot of people that's one of the great movies. And then the '80s gave us Hoosiers, gave us Major League, which is a comedy, but it's also underdog movie. And then you kind of roll off that success, right? And so we even got the kids underdog movie with Mighty Ducks for ourselves. Maybe White Man Can't Jump unless you. It's not really an underdog movie, right? They're just kind of gamblers, just hustlers, but you know, 92 people trying to get over on society, right? I think there's something also in the water slash society about how people feel about kind of being beaten down. So we're okay with people hustling in Diggstown in White Man Can't Jump. So I think there's a lot of things going on, right? It's the reason why movies like Falling Down are so successful. There's something going on.
Yeah, I was trying to think about like where we were like in the sports world in the early '90s, right? Jordan's about to like begin his big run, or I think he's just starting the first of the runs.
I think they just won their
Back then,
second. They win
he's
their second
doing
one
it
in '92. Yeah.
right. So they win their second one in '92. There's the Leitner shot in '92, and then like there's also like the what is it the basketball too, the Olympics, right? Like it is like we're having a
Yeah.
moment
No.
in sports. It feels like in 1992. Was it the
Right.
Giants? Was the Giants won in what 91? Where they were the underdog against the Bills? Was it?
Yeah, where they missed the field goal. But there's that, and then Society '91 is Rodney King, '92 is South Central Riot. So I think there is a lot of there's a moment for like I don't know if you call Diggstown a feel good moment, but it's black and white at a time where I think things were kind of seemed divided, right? And so you got these old uh people, right? Louis Scott's is what he's like 47, 48 in that movie, right? As a boxer. And it's just kind of coming together. So I think that's part of it too. Just the way everything felt so divided. And then you have this kind of these two guys getting over on this rich guy. Spoiler alert, you should have saw this movie 30 years ago, by the way.
Yeah.
If we're ruining
Do we have to put a spoiler alert out on a 33-year-old movie?
it. No.
You want to talk about this cast? James Woods.
You know what's interesting watching that movie going back, you don't like that guy, right? Like in the moment, I liked him as an actor. Now it's like as a person, I don't like him. And so now to watch it back, I'm like, oh, this guy's a jerk in this movie, right? Like, but in real time, you're rooting for him to get over on it. But I love, Louis Gossett. I don't think he makes a bad movie. And so I think with those two, especially with Louis carrying everything, you got a strong cast.
Yeah, it's hard to now for people who didn't grow up watching Louis Gossett Jr. like recognize what he like brought this gravitas to like every single thing he did. Whether it was obviously Officer and Gentleman might be like his first like real big thing where he just exploded. He was an Enemy Mine. You remember that with Dennis Quaid back in the day?
Yeah.
And of course, Chappie, like we're talking, like y'all get ready. We're doing Iron Eagle on this pod. Like I don't know,
Yes.
in 3 hours. We're going to call some friends. Heather Graham is in this movie. Did you recognize her? Did you remember her being in this movie? Because I did not.
I didn't remember her being in the movie, but when I watched it, I was like, man, when I watch movies, I always got to look up the cast. I was like, oh, okay, this person looks familiar. This is who it is. But yeah, no, I didn't remember who the woman character was. Like I was like, you just come in as this boxing movie at 14. You're like, and then now you're like, oh, okay, I recognize these folks. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember feeling a little weird back then that James Woods was so much older than Heather Graham. I remember feeling a lot weirder about it now that I'm an adult, who was older than James Woods was whenever they made this movie, and they became like a thing in real life, like during the filming of this movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was 44, 45, and she was 22.
Man, 44 looked old back then. He looked old in that movie too. Yeah.
Dude, you say that, but my beard has gone full on white, and I'm 47. Like, it's like, but you're absolutely right. Like, 44 looked old back then. We're talking about the
Right.
90s. It wasn't that far ago. All right, I want to get into this. We're talking about really. I mean, this movie's ultimately, about the con, but it's Louis Gossett Jr. carrying this film, and this idea of one man going like all these rounds and fighting all these guys within a single day. And your book, really kind of takes place after the Civil War, this late 19th century and so forth. I think a lot of people who grow up really associate boxing with black athletes for the most part, guys who grew up with like Ali and all these guys, George Foreman and Tyson and all these dudes, right? Where do these black boxing traditions come from? I mean, where does this emerge out of?
I mean, fighting, like I try to tell my students, everybody fights, right? Every culture has their own sense of fighting, martial arts, and even with slavery, there's martial arts and fighting styles that come over from West Africa. And when we see it today, I'm gonna butcher the name, but in Brazil, like capoeiras and stuff like that. And there's fighting styles in South Carolina that are still related to West Africa. But the plantation, right? They're wrestling. We'll call it wrestling. They were fighting. They were boxing, and not everybody. I don't want to make it seem like there is a movie like Mandigo it stars a boxer, Ken Norton, in the 1970s. That's about boxing on the plantation, and then there's this real fighter. The first black person to actually fight for the heavyweight championship in 1810. Tom Molyneux was reportedly a slave, enslaved in Virginia, and the story goes that he got his freedom by winning. He beat another enslaved person, wins, and then he gets his freedom. That's how much money was bet, and then he goes from Virginia to Baltimore, which is we're talking 1809, which is a port city, so there's a lot of sailors, a lot of fighting. He goes from there to New York, and then he goes to the hub of boxing, London. And so there is this long tradition of black folks fighting. The book, though, for me, I just started in 1880, right? Kind of post Reconstruction. This is when you're going to see, like I said, like this ascension where there's actually a lot, not just like isolated guys like Molyneux, but there's a number of guys like vying for the heavyweight championship, even though they're not allowed to fight because of racism and the color line. So they have their own titles, right? There's the color heavyweight champion, and that exists really until Jack Johnson wins the championship in 1908. So he'll win that in 1903. But the first person who wins that, I want to say, if I can remember from my book, is 1882. So it's just been around, and they're fighting. And one of the things we talk about in this book, and I think you see it a little bit in the Lou Gossett character, especially early on, is that, it's called I Fight for a Living because these guys make this decision that this is the only thing that I could do to make decent money. Now, it's not a great living because you're getting hit to make a living. And I try to make that point, right? It's very dangerous and stuff like that, but it's quick money. It's $25 here, $50 here. If you get good, it's 500, it's 1,000. And then, what you do with your money is what you do with your money. And I think you see that a little bit in the Lou Gossett character, who, if I recall correctly, he's fighting. Now, it's so hard for us being in 2025 to kind of remember the years and stuff like that. So he's fighting. I think his peak of his career is in the 1970s, and then he comes back in early 90s. But he's a lifer, right? Like he's a lifer. He gets out of it because the game is rigged. You don't technically know what happened to him, but the game is rigged. There's a lot of gambling going on, but he's still there, right? When the story picks up, he's in the boxing gym. And to me, he's one of these characters that, gets lost in history. Obviously he's fake, but we don't get to know everyone's name in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, because they're all Honey Roy Palmers, right? They're these guys who are just meal ticket fighters. That's all he was. He was a cash meal ticket fighter in this movie. And that's why nobody heard of him, right? He doesn't make it out of small time Texas or Louisiana or wherever he's fighting.
Yeah. So I want to keep it during like the 1880s, 1890s for a second and so forth, right? And talk about like coming out of Reconstruction, which, gosh, it just seems like we need to keep talking about this era to understand 2025. And I'm wondering, like, when we're talking about these black men fighting, I'm assuming these are bare knuckles brawling kind of contests, and like, are these exploitative? Who's going to these matches? Are these black men fighting in front of black audiences? Are these black men fighting in front of white audiences? Like, what's the dynamics of the performance of boxing? In the 1880s and 90s.
Yeah, so you have a couple of styles, right? And so, um, for the most part, up until the 1880s, most people are bare knuckle, right? And then a lot of times it's finish fight, and so the way that works. So if you're reading anything about boxing, 1830s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, these are bare knuckles. These are finish fights, and what that means is that you get knocked down, you get 30 seconds to get up. So it's more like what they call the London rules versus the Queensberry rules is what we're kind of under now. And you get to get up. And if you can't get up, that's over. That's the finish, right? And so rounds just keep going. There's no like, hey, you get a minute between rounds. What you'll start to see with the era that I'm talking about is that the rules are more put in place so that it becomes legal. So all that stuff's illegal. Now to make it legal is, all right, 3-minute rounds. We're going to put some gloves on you. Now, even though some champions still fought with bare fists. So the last bare fist champion, John O'Sullivan, who was 1882 to 1892, gentleman Jim Corbett wins it. He's wearing gloves. But for the most part, the guys I'm talking about, except these guys in the picture, they have gloves on. And that's really for the middle class because they want to start to see it, right? So if we talk history and masculinity, manliness in the 19th century, the middle class are starting to get more involved in athletics, rise of college football, baseball is popular, and boxing is really popular because they want to see these guys. They want to see these guys fight. They want to see these guys muscles. It's just like, watching Eugene Sandel, who's a strong man, right? This is what people want to do for entertainment, but it's illegal. So to make it legal, you put the gloves on, you put the time rounds, and it makes it seem like it's sane, but it's really damaging because now you just hit somebody more, right? So if I take off the gloves, you have a quicker chance of getting knocked out, which can be bad, but it can save you. So if I put on 8-ounce gloves, 10-ounce gloves, now this fight that might have been over in 3 or 4 rounds, right? It's just protecting my hands, but you're getting hit a lot more. As far as audience, if it's not a black controlled club, and so there are few black controlled clubs, really small, it's whites, and it's probably 95, 96, 7, 8, 99% whites. You got to be somebody's friend to be allowed in there. So they're fighting in front of white folks, which is, if it's an interracial contest, it's real dangerous. Especially if you win and they win the majority of the fight. So you're just not only they're going to hurl racial epithets at you, but it's the threat of your life at all times. Because also there's drinking, there's money involved too. So that's what they're like. And then there's this other fight that I talk about a little bit in the book. I wanted to title it Beyond the Battle Royale. So there's these things called battle royales or battle royals. And so those are, they would take 10 guys, 12 guys, usually boys sometimes, blindfold them sometimes, and then they throw them in the ring. And you got to be, talking about poor. And then, you just fight, and the winner gets a couple quarters. And that's a lot of these guys. So Joe Gans, who's a champion, came up that way. Jack Johnson, who's one of the greatest fighters ever, came up that way. There's a really good fighter, Bojack, who wins a world championship during World War II era. He comes up that way in Augusta, Georgia. So I don't know if you've ever seen that James Brown movie with the Chadwick Boseman. At the beginning of that movie, there's a battle royale scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened there at Augusta. So these rich whites would come from the north, and come south, and then they would get these poor black boys from that era. And this guy Bojack was one of them. Like, he's just this poor, illiterate guy. And within a decade, he's the, champion of the world. He's illiterate. And so when things go wrong with him, he winds up just being brought for the last 3 decades of his life. But that's how fighting was.
You really hit on a lot of questions that I've got here, which is, you're talking about the idea, like during some of these fights, white versus black fights, things like that. black fighters start to win these fights a lot, right? And we're kind of build up to like Jack Johnson in 1903. He's the guy, is a guy I'm roughly familiar with this timeline. I know about Johnson, right? You start to see these black men defeating white men over and over and over again. And here is yet another example of the fact that, wait a second, this inferior race of people sure seems to kick the shit out of white guys a lot. Like, is there a movement? Obviously, we're not talking about a movement towards black equality just yet or anything like that. But how does black success, in the ring, like change the ways in which maybe white folk are looking at black folk or anything like that? Like, what's going on here as far as like race relations in the late 19th century as a result of these victories?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at it, and one of the things you hit on is that sports is all about manliness and superiority at that time, right? And that's what it's about. So even women who try to participate in sports, whether it's basketball or cycling, they're not welcome, right? Especially physical activity. We don't need to get into that, but sports is about manliness, and it's because in boxing you have this color line. Of course, you're going to think, well, we're racially superior, right? And so the heavyweight champion is supposed to be, up until a few years ago, the baddest person on the planet, right? And really represents a race. But that time, they're very clear about this, right? Even though John L. Sullivan, who's the first American champion, he's Irish American, right? And that, for an Irish American at that time, it's a big deal. Now, you're going to lose that hyphenation as long as you're right. Sure. As long as you're champion, you're American. And guys like Jim Corbett, Bob Fitzsimmons, Jim Jeffries, these guys all stood for racial superiority, and that's how they saw sports. Now, black audiences in the 1880s, especially the middle class, and this is kind of one of the things I talk about in this book, and I try to tell my students, this is a love affair for sport because they understand how America sees sports. 1880s, we love it. 2025, we love it. And we love it for the reason superiority, but it proves hard work, right? Because you got to remember, there's no government intervention at this time, right? You're successful. Obviously, rich people are born rich and they're successful, but we like to tell ourselves to this day from your hard work, right? And if the stereotypes about blacks in the 1880s is that you're lazy, and I know it because you're poor, right? And ignoring all the racism, all this other stuff, all the history of slavery and the end of Reconstruction, you ignore all that and just say you're poor, you're lazy. Sports is like, oh, now everything's equal, right? And whether we're racing, if you allow me on that football field, and that's only one or two, or you allow me on baseball, you can see that ends really quick, right? The gentleman's agreement in baseball is 1887. So you have this small opportunity, but boxing, it's the ultimate, right? Because we're the same weight. It's the same ring. It's the same gloves. And they don't like mismatches in boxing because there's a betting public, right? So even to this day, like a fight, the end of a fight might seem like a mismatch, but you try to get as equal as possible. So everything's equal. And so the black middle class and black folks watching this, like, if things are fair, we tend to win. And so white audience realize that, like, man, we're saying we're superior racially, but when they get into the ring, black folks win more than not, right? And it's proven, right? Like, so one of the chapters I have looks at Los Angeles, and to be able to do that, not only, the LA Times is online, but I get the Herald, Los Angeles Herald, and I get the sports section every day from 1897 to 1902, like every single sports section for, that time period, and go over it and track all these fights and all these boxers and figure that out. And you'll start to see, fights are banned. Mixed fights, obviously in the South, would going to be banned for, to the 1950s for most places. But mixed fights are going to start to be banned in states like New York, Los Angeles briefly, just because this is how they see it, right? If boxing is about manliness and we're losing these fights, then what does that say about us? Well, we'll just, and then, I'll stop with this, is that the largest day of rioting in American history until April 4th, 1968, when MLK is assassinated, is when Jack Johnson beats Jim Jeffries July 4th, 1910. So Johnson wins the championship in 1908. That's when the idea of the Great White Hope starts, which is also a movie, The Great White Hope and The Great White Hype. We could have done that movie too. And then there's that search for him. And then finally, Jim Jeffries comes out of retirement, fights Jack Johnson, and Jack Johnson beats him. Spoiler, if you haven't seen that fight, you had 115 years. And at least 20 black people across the nation are killed. Simply because Jack Johnson won. One lady has her tongue shot out for cheering for him. And that's how they saw these fights. So it's a big deal, like these interracial contests at that time.
Wow. I want to ask you about prison boxing, Lou. This film starts with prison boxing. We've seen like that prison boxing happens so often in movies that it's like its own thing. Is prison boxing a thing? Like Lou, I've never been to prison. How long have been people like sanctioned fights? Like what's going on here with prison bouts? Did you see any of that when you were doing the research and so forth?
Yeah, my guess is that it's been going on forever, right? But like one of the great heavyweights of all time, Sonny Liston, learned how to fight in prison. So in Missouri prison, they actually let him out in the 1950s because they're like, this is your one shot at life. You could be a champion. And he gets out, and then a couple of years later, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. Now nobody likes him. It's the 1960s, and he's black, right, and he's mean, and he's mixed in with the mafia and stuff like that. But yeah, they're fighting. And part of, sports at prison, and Carl Sutler, who's at Emory, talks about this or writes about this. It's all about reform, right? Like a lot of times prison, you use sports in general is about reform, right? Outside and inside. And so that, boxing doesn't seem like it reform, but it is. It's a way to toughen somebody up, to train them, to get them disciplined, dedicated, and stuff. And then it's entertainment, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are really tough. There's a few movies in the 1980s that look at prison boxing. I forget the top of the head. Like I forget the names. It might actually be Prison Fighter. So I don't know. It's the real movies, like kind of B movies. And that's around. And then there's this one interesting character from the War of 1812, which I don't talk about it in the book because it doesn't make it. But there's this guy, Richard Severs, nicknamed King Dick. We could say that. It's just that's his name, because he was actually like 6'7", they say 300 pounds. And then he gets in prison during the War of 1812. And he has a sparring background, right? I talk about this. There's an article I wrote for Journal of African History in like 2012 about, black fighters in antebellum who are sparrers, who are trainers. And that's what he did. And so when he's in prison, obviously he's the biggest guy there, but he's also sparring and teaching sparring and having these boxing fights. So it goes back a long time.
I gotta ask you, what about like these 24? This whole thing is set up over like, okay, we're gonna fight over a day. It's 24 hours. Did you see these two? Are these guys fighting? I remember when UFC came out, right? When it first hit, right? Early in the 90s and stuff like that. These guys were fighting multiple fights in a single night and stuff like that. Did you see accounts like this as well, where guys were having multiple fights in a single day or quick turnarounds and stuff like that? Because I'm used to like a guy will fight now, and then maybe I'll see him again later in the year, 6, 7, 8, 9 months or something like that. But were people fighting like these big, like 24-hour matches where they were doing lots of fights?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure there would be like just a cheap meal ticket guy. The big guys wouldn't, right? Because you spend so much. That's what's. I don't want to say this movie's fake, but look, if you're fighting back-to-back fight, one of those fights is fake, right? And that's why we call wrestling, right? Like these guys go from town to town, have these matches and stuff like that, because you could do that, right? But for a real fight, you can't come in like Hunter Roy Palmer a week before and really think you got to train for 10 fights and stuff like that. But there, there are long fights, right? Peter Jackson, who's probably one of the best fighters in the late 1880s, early 1890s. Him and Jim Corbett have a 61 round fight. Another fighter, I want to say Andy Bowen, who was passing. So if you've seen Sinners, you know what I'm talking about by passing. So he's black, but as passes as white. He has a fight that's over 100 something rounds. So that's like those are like long lasting fights, but you're gonna stop getting those fights as we get to the turn of the century because they're just seen as brutal, and so that's why you get 20 rounds, 25 rounds is a long fight. By the we're I think up into the 1980s we're at 15 rounds, and now we're at 12 rounds. 3 minutes. And so that's the other thing about that movie. That fight, something like that wouldn't have been sanctioned unless it's Jake Paul or something like that. But yeah, you're not really sanctioning something like that.
Well, you made a quip earlier about this not being a real movie, but I got a real question for you. And I started to think about this in real terms, which is this film comes out in 1992. George Foreman recaptures the title 2 years later, it looking not unlike Lou Gossett Jr. in this film. He's about the same age. I think he's 44, if I recall correctly, 42, 44 when he retakes the title in 94.
Yeah. He's pretty old.
40, yeah, right? Yeah. 46, something like that, right? So here's my question, Lou. Does this film kind of legitimize the idea of an older fighter returning to the ring? Because I don't recall. I remember that when Foreman comes back, it's a big deal that he's old. At least that's what people were saying.
Yeah, I think Foreman's such a one-off, though. Like, because we've seen guys. I mean, look, Mike Tyson, who I don't want to get in trouble with Mike Tyson. He's a really good fighter, generally not a great fighter. I mean, he struggled against Jake Paul, who's not. Again, Paul's been fighting for 5 straight years, so he's decent. Evander Holyfield tried to fight a couple years ago, looked bad. Roy Jones tries to fight, looks bad. So to me, Foreman's a one-off, but it is a great story, right? It is. I mean, the beauty of the Foreman story is that you can kind of do anything, and I think a lot of people now we're his age, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's. I mean, I struggle to play at the Y basketball, but it is. I mean, it's look at a time when my guess is a lot of Americans. I mean, we're teenagers, but a lot of Americans felt like, man, things are against me. All this stuff, like someone coming out like at that age, coming in beating 10 young guys, probably feels really good. Or 9 young guys. I don't want to spoil the 10th guy.
Yeah,
9. Yeah.
First of all, every time I hear someone refer to 46 as old, I'm just like, what? Yeah. No, stop that. And I'm ego lifting at the gym at this point in time, knowing I'm going to like tear a rotator cuff or something off of a shoulder or something. So the fact that Foreman was able to get in there and do that is, I went back and watched his fight against it was Moorer, right? Michael Moorer,
yeah.
Yeah, and he just popped him, just right, and Moorer just dropped, man. I wouldn't want to get hit by Foreman passed away recently, and I still wouldn't want to get hit by his corpse. So there's that. You and I both rewatched this film recently. Are there parts when you went back to rewatch it? We both kind of hinted at this idea that it is aged a bit, right? And we have different relationships to this film. I think both rewatching it most recently versus maybe our memory of the film. Are there parts of this film when you went back to rewatch it, Lou, that you really dug?
Yeah.
Are there good parts of this movie?
Man, I was like, man, I should have just stuck with Creed 2. No.
I got you. Yeah. I'm having you and Sudler come back on for Creed 2.
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah. No. Creed 2. I mean, it's just as real as Creed 2, right? There's nobody who wins one fight is going to be the champion of the world. That's not how boxing works. But I liked. The names were awesome. They're just simply awesome. I love Honey Roy Palmer and my guy Diggs, Charles Macon Diggs. I like that. Anytime there's gambling, Charles Macon Diggs is a heck of a name. But what I like though is the dirty side of boxing. They tried to make it as more of a gambling movie, but I think they understood that boxing's a dirty game. And the guys who take all the punishment are the ones who they get paid, but they take the punishment. And there's all these other people trying to get a piece of you. And even James Woods' character was kind of like that. And you got the sense that he did Roy wrong at one point. And they try to make it seem like, I saved you, but I don't think that's what happened. They never got into that. And then the Diggs character, I appreciated that part, right? That he's punch drunk, but it's not his fault. And I like that they went into that. Seeing Tex Cobb in a movie is always cool. And all that stuff, but it wasn't. It's weird. It's like sometimes we can watch movies from our generation and it still holds up, right? Like if Top Gun's on TV, I'll watch it in bits and pieces. Karate Kid, I think just all the Karate Kids, either 1, 2, and 3, even with Hilary Swank. I'm just kidding. I'm not watching that one. And I don't know if you've ever seen Cobra Kai, like one of the great seasons 1 through 5.
Stop. I love what they've done with Johnny's character, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. I stopped. I didn't watch this new season because I got the ending that I wanted. Yeah. I saw everybody that I needed to see. Unless you're telling me Hilary Swank's coming back, then I'm good.
No.
So I saw everything.
But we even got a redemption arc in Okinawa, right?
No, that was awesome.
Like, and what this is like, look, all these dudes who were teenagers in Karate Kid grew up to be adults. Like, it's okay for you to be a shithead when you're little to make mistakes, and then you grow up and you become like a fully mature adult who says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was, rude to you, or I was bad to you, or tried to kill you in front of the entire village." And Peter Cetera was singing the song, but whatever.
And the girl too tried to get
I wanted Daniel and Kumiko to be together.
I don't know how the villagers didn't get over that little moat. I was like,
well, like what happens the next day?
Like, you jump over the moat and then we can all just beat them up. But okay, we're gonna have we're gonna have a finish fight. And that's what it was. It was a finish fight. And he was like, live or die. Wrong, honk. So that's great. Sorry, listeners, to bring back the great Karate Kid 2. And
we're bringing back.
Can't go wrong.
Welcome to the 80s with Jason and Lou. So we'll sit back and relax. We're gonna be going. All right, let's talk about this. What parts of this film did not age well? When you were there parts of this film that made you cringe?
No, you know what? It's not like I don't want the religious thing. I just thought it was a bad movie. It's my childhood, right? I just think James Wood as the smartest person in the world just doesn't hold up for me, right? Like getting out of prison.
He's not likable.
Like the favorite part is at the end where he just and then thumbs downs it, but he's just not likable then and now. Like in the movie, it's like, dang, he's getting over on somebody. Like what, is my man even getting money? Is Honeyroy Palmer like getting out of his situation? But I like that the whole, it's no. But I think people should go back and watch it. It's only an hour and a half at most. But the idea of it, though, the premise is pretty cool. The 10 fights in a day, 24 hours, arguing what a day is and who gets to fight and what the order is. Like going back, I wish they wouldn't have tried to game the system. Like I wanted to see this guy fight through it all. But yeah,
I hated the portrayal of the two brothers that were.
Oh God, yeah. You're right. Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, as a guy from the South, I kind of roll my eyes at the whole idea of the hicky Southern guy who's dumb or whatever. I mean, those guys exist, but they're everywhere, So it's low hanging fruit. But I really, the one brother was just like so cowardly and afraid and submissive, and I was like, I get that maybe these are the descendants of sharecroppers and stuff like that. That's a line that you can play all the way through, where you can talk about generational poverty and stuff like Lou. I feel like watching this movie. This movie is begging to get remade. Is really the way I got feeling out of this, because I'm like, it kind of feels a bit like the production value of it aren't that great. Right. The storyline is interesting enough, right? Let's bring an old guy back. Yeah. These guys have got beef. They don't really trust each other. We can watch boxing all day long, especially if it's not Stallone, because we want another story out there. So I guess here's my part. I'm going to ask you to put on your director's hat now that you are faculty at Michigan State University, sir. You get to cast this film. Who's directing it? I'll just ask you for like your main three here. Let's go Honeyroy Palmer. Let's go the James Woods character, Gabriel, and then the main bad guy, Bruce Dern, John Gillen.
Yeah, I liked him as a bad guy.
He's good as a bad guy.
I'm buying up the whole town. Golly. Okay,
This has
okay.
shades of Roadhouse, did it not?
Which one? The Did you see the one that came out on Prime like a couple of years ago, or
Yeah, they're making
Jake
a sequel
Paul?
to it
Yeah.
now. They just signed a
Are they?
sequel. Yeah, they're
Oh,
doing.
that's
We're
awesome.
getting
Yeah.
another one.
That's
It's fun.
all
It's
right,
fine.
all right. So who's 50 that I would want to see? You know, what's his name? Wood Harris. Um, I think
Oh
he would be
yeah,
good. Um, if I'm getting the right Harris right.
from The Wire.
Yeah, I think he would be a good Lou Gossip guy. Why don't we just bring up everybody from The Wire?
Can we just
I think Wood Harris. You know,
Okay.
like if you want to do like. It's so cliche to say Ryan Coogler, but I think he would do a really good Southern. This is Southern penitentiary stuff, bringing stuff back. The James Wood. Do we say Dean Cain? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I got it for you. Ready?
Who?
Dominic West. We get McNulty.
Oh yeah. Just bring him back. Yeah, you probably would. Yeah, and then the old guy would have to be like, so I don't know, but it was just like, I'm not good at casting. I'm good at thinking about other things. I'd be awful at casting these movies because I'd like just put a Bikini Woodbine would be good.
I feel like we started to do this. This is like the third time actually someone has started to recast a film with actors from The Wire. I think that probably just needs to be a new thing where it's like, okay, recast this movie with actors from The Wire. You can only choose actors from The Wire, and they and do this. So you got Bunk in there as whoever. So you could do whatever.
Yeah, I don't know who would Bunk. No. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know who would Bunk. Oh, you know who Bunk would play? Bunk would play the role of Oliver Platt, who goes in and like hustles everybody.
Oh yeah, he's too old.
He's too old.
That's such a tough. You know what? Like you could reverse it, and Bunk would be a good bad guy, the guy who runs the town, right? You kind of reverse.
Well, he's got that gravitas.
He could run the town and kind of just,
Did you see him in the Jack Ryan series?
Oh yeah, I like that. Yeah. Anything bad, anything like just guilty pleasure, like Jack Ryan, or what's the one I was watching? Reacher, like all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
I'll watch.
Are you watching Reacher?
Oh, I finished it right away. Yeah. So currently I'm catching up on 1923, and so.
Dude, I can't talk to you anymore about 1923 because
you haven't finished. So I'm like episode 4, and like I'll say this: I know we're supposed to talk about Diggstown, but look, I love 1, 2. There's a lot of storylines going on for me, and I'm like, God, I'm waiting for them to like just merge, and I kind of undersee. I've watched a little. I don't like the newer Yellowstone. It's too soap opera for me. So, but I loved 1883. Is that the one?
1883 and 1923. I think 1923 is the best they've done.
No, yeah, it's really good. It's really good. There's a lot of storylines going on. Every time you think people are going to get together, you're like, oh, I got to wait another 50 minutes to see what happens.
I can't even talk to you about it because I know what's going to happen. I watched the whole series, and it's good luck, buddy. I got to finish watching Andor.
No, it's really.
Oh, it's good.
I think it's well done. A lot of the land stuff is cool. Like kind of, the older folks meeting new technology in their way. You have the abuse at the boarding schools, which I think is really important to get in there, and you find yourself rooting for a character. I don't want to spoil it, but you guys should watch it. You find yourself rooting for a lot of people.
Here's the thing about the boarding school thing. I think that's brilliant what they're doing, right? Because I think your average TV viewer, right, who goes through high school and takes some history classes or whatever, they're familiar with like dispossession. Maybe they know about Trail of Tears or reservation systems, but many folks don't really know about what happens on the boarding schools, right? And so in my day job, I went out to Oklahoma to visit with some tribes back in December, and to a person, every time I visited with 4, I was on visit with 4 different tribes when I was out there in December, and each person I was with who brought me around the town, they don't have reservations out there; they're all on allotments. Each one of we all went to the museum, talked about boarding schools, full on. It's like we have to talk about the damage boarding schools did. It's horrific. It's like what boarding schools did. I don't know that we'll ever quite be able to put it into terms for people who did not have to suffer through that. But that 1923 is talking about it and putting it out there for people who didn't experience it or aren't the products of people who experience it, good on them, man. Because that's some heavy stuff to like address. Our boy Honey Roy Palmer wins. He fights the 9+1 people. We talked earlier on. We talked about George Foreman. We talked Ali and Tyson and all these guys. Who were some guys, Lou, that you really like? Some people are probably vaguely familiar with Jack Johnson, I think. Who are some people that like we should know about? Who are some boxers that we should really know about in history that like maybe don't get the credit that they deserve?
So one of the person who probably gets the credit they deserve, we talk about, but we don't talk about a lot, and you can actually put them in your class if you teach 20th century. Joe Louis, and so Joe Louis was heavyweight champion from 1937 to 1949. It's fair to say his biggest fight started in 1938 against Max Schmeling. So you have this kind of beginning of World War II angle. You have Germany, you got U.S., and it's just an opportunity to talk about the Great Migration when you talk about him, because he's born in Alabama, comes up in Detroit. And then he also gives money away during World War II to the war cause. He's really seen as a hero. Because like, unlike Ali, I'm not bashing Ali, is that Joe Louis, puts on a uniform. And that's at a time when a lot of people aren't like, no, I'm not going. Raises money, puts on exhibition fights. But of course, he also goes broke because of that. Because he was making a lot of money in 1941. And all of a sudden, when you're giving money away to the military and fighting these exhibition fights, you still owe back taxes, right? From 41. And he never really catches up. Never, ever in his life catches up from those moments. But he's such a great, great story. If you like flashy people, Sugar Ray Robinson, some say he's the greatest fighter of all time. He's like the guy who originally, the first person who has, like, you'd say, an entourage or a posse, where he's coming with his tailor, he's coming with the golf pro, he's coming with musicians everywhere with him. This is where you're rolling deep, and he just happens to be the best fighter in the world. So there's a lot of, it just depends what era you like. Like when I do basic U.S. history, I like to incorporate fighters. So regardless, race, ethnicity, just kind of put them in to kind of show how sports works in American society. So, 1930s, Barney Ross, Jewish American fighter, who was a champion at 3 different weight classes at the same time. And he loses, but he gets redemption, goes to World War II. He's on Guadalcanal, and the story is he like kills 10 Japanese soldiers in one night and becomes like this American hero. I believe, if I have this correct, since this is a movie show, Monkey Off My Back is kind of about his post-war life, and that's him getting off kicking whatever drug, World War II. So World War II is like the greatest generation. We don't really talk about them being on drugs afterwards, but they're on, some of those guys struggled, right? We generally go like kind of Vietnam War on that. But it's a movie about that, kind of kicking a drug habit post World War II. So there's, obviously Rocky Balboa is a great fighter we should all know about. I'm just kidding. He's not real. But
how dare you, sir? You've been to Philly,
I know,
right?
I know. I love my Rockies.
Have you run up the museum the museum stairs in Philadelphia?
I've never even been to Philadelphia, and I'm too old to run up those stairs.
Lumor, you've not done that.
No, I would. Younger me can make it. Older me, I don't know. His knees would hurt. Have you done it?
Yeah, I did it. The AHA was there 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I ran up there, and like I had the music playing in my head. Like I put the headphones on. A friend of mine recorded, and we just speeded up a whole lot. So because my knees also, and I'm heavy, like so. And then they've got like a spot. They've got a spot right there where you can stand. They've got his footprints where you can stand and jump up and do the thing.
Oh, nice.
and see the whole city. And it was really cool because like everybody's doing it. Like you don't have to feel like a fool because everybody there was like 12 other people running up there when I did it. And the best part was that I got out of Philadelphia without getting scabies or anything else. Like Philly's a rough town, man. Like I like to bang on Philly because I love Chicago. I love Boston. I don't love Philly, man. Philly's not my place, dude.
That's funny.
Whatever. So, all right, let me ask you our big question here, Lou. Is Diggstown a history movie?
I think there's elements that we. I mean,
We're stretching.
it's all a history movie, but there's elements, right, about kind of like I think they could have done a better job about kind of like small town South, and I really think I think that someone could do a good job using it to talk about really the Great Depression, like 60 years later, and kind of what some of these folks had to go through, and just like just the way you look at land and just struggling and stuff like that, and prison and exploitation in prison. So there's some stuff there. There's stuff there, and I think they knew what they're doing making it, because there's the lynching. I mean, the guy does a spoiler. He does get lynched in the locker room, and I think there's a callback. And what's interesting about this movie is that they don't talk about race a lot, like explicitly about race, but we understand it because Lou Gossip's there. There's the white James Wood. It is a black white movie, like you saw a lot, 70s, 80s, even like all the Eddie Murphy films, right? Except Coming to America, right? It is. So we're used to the black white kind of stuff, but it's not really there. One of the things when I was rewatching is like, oh, when are they going to bring this up? When are they going to bring this up? They never bring it up, and it's till the end, where they get. I mean, he's called the N-word. There's that lynching scene, and that's really it, right? So it is this kind of weird thing where this black man goes in the South, and nobody's really talking about race, that he's going to fight these white guys, and except the two black fighters, and three. And nobody's really talking about any of that. He's just this black guy running around, this older black guy. And everyone's cool with it. So it's really interesting. And because there's not a lot of black people in that movie, right? There's just those two guys.
The two young men, right? And they're I think they're in Georgia, right? It's like, here's my thought. It's like, as you know, I've been talking about this thing. And of course, we're talking about this. We've been talking about Sinners all night too. Which is that I think all the elements are there. And this is the real power. If you had a talented filmmaker, you have all the elements here to go back and you can set this film in you could set this film in 1992 if you want. You can set it 30 years ago. You can set it contemporary. You can set it now if you want. I mean, there's tons of Confederate monuments out there. People are still quite literally living in the shadow of the Confederacy, right? Like all the elements that are in this film with a more talented filmmaker, I think, Lou, could really flesh this out, man. It's talking about race and class, masculinity, the penal system. You have this guy come out of like a for-profit, prison or some jazz like that or whatever. It's like, you can talk about immigration. Dude, you could do. I think Jason and Lou need to rewrite. We need to rewrite this movie.
Right. Rewrite it. But and
bring it to your boy.
Like, gambling, right? And so I don't even think that's state sanctioned gambling, right? So there's this like and now with how everybody's gambling now on sports and everything's a bet, right? And if you guys haven't seen this movie, everyone mortgages their future on this fight, and the guy who wins is the guy who drugs them up, right? And
yeah.
So the pre-fight, the Charles Macon Diggs fight, and so everyone's just in that town. Like this guy owns this whole town because of this one gambling fight, and fights are fixed, right? There's a lot of gambling in sports to this day. Boxing is notorious, so it works with boxing because boxing is notorious for fixed fights and stuff like that historically. So it works, but you're right. Like the historian in me is like, oh, you just need to do this better. But then again, sometimes we just need to be entertained, right? And that's why, that's like watching Sinners. Like when I watch it, I'm just like, I just want to watch this movie. I don't want to. And then after I got done, it's like, you know what? I want to do World War I movie with the stack. Right? I want to see the stack. I want to smoke a stack of World War I and put them in, because there's not enough like black World War I films. And they're probably.
Where's our Harlem Hellfighter film, man?
Right. Now, and by the way, now that we're celebrating, I believe World War I Day, Victory Day, so maybe you'll get something out of it.
You know what? I was just talking about this, the movie I want to see. I want to see Black American fighters staying in Paris after the war. I want to see Lost Generation. There's so many African American men who, after World War I, just stick around Europe, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. HBO did a movie. It had to be in the 90s when they were doing the movies, right? So it's not the Tuskegee Airmen, but they do a Black World War One film. I don't know when, what it's called. And they're in Paris. I don't know how long they stay. Speaking about boxers, since we're here, there's this fighter, battling CK. Very interesting story. Really good book about him. So CK comes from Senegal. The story goes is that this white tourist, right? Like these young kids at Senegal would dive for coins off the boat. And she saw this teenage young boy. He's like, oh, I want to keep him. Tells the parents, I'll take care of him. Brings him back to Europe, France. It's like, I can't take care of you, or puts him in like an orphanage. And this guy, like from Africa, is just there. It's a true story, right? He's just there. And then World War One breaks out and they got to use, the other African colonial subjects to fight. And he fights and then he gets out and the war is over and he gets back to boxing. And I want to say it's 1923. He beats the French hero, Georges Carpentier, for the light heavyweight champion of the world. So here's this guy. And so he fights in World War One. He's in France and he's the light heavyweight champion of the world. They absolutely hate him, right? Because he's black and he beats their hero and he's from Africa. So he's actually the first Black fighter that's allowed to fight for a world championship after Jack Johnson loses in 1915. There's only a handful that are allowed to fight. And he winds up fighting an Irish guy in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day and loses the fight. I think it's a decision. And never
You're not
really
going to beat an Irish guy in Dublin on St. Patrick's.
And they knew it. And then he never gets to fight in Europe, and he goes to America and he gets just kicked by these really poor, hungry Black fighters who never get a chance, and just they throw him against Black fighters, and these guys are just tough, right? Who probably could be heavyweight champion of the world, but they can't fight it, so they just take it out on him. And spoiler, he's in America maybe a couple years before the shot they suspect by the mob in an alley in New York. So it's like this quick rise and fall. But there you go. Speaking about World War One and boxing, we kind of wrap it all up. But yeah,
listen, we just need to follow Smoke and Stack like around like Chicago and Europe and everything else, and like just what we need to see them as like side characters, and then like this world that they touch and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, you have a whole movie on them ripping off the Irish and the Italian gangs when it comes to bootlegging and stuff like that, right? Because that's still how they got their money. They ripped them, they stole money and they invested into a juke joint. So
yeah, oh, God, that's so good. So,
and
all right,
what real last thing? We're going long here. I don't want to take up time, but what's so interesting about that movie? Talking about prison movies in the 90s is it's the same. So the same year this movie's set, I want to say 1932, is also the same year that Life starts, the movie with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. And so, again, Northerners coming from New York bootlegging, and they get caught up in the system. And so they're working in prison. So in one way you can see those guys on the chain gang as Martin, and they should have had Martin and Eddie Murphy there. Or obviously they would have been, that would have been their first year in on the chain gang.
Dude, how crazy would that have been? Like you look up,
great. Yeah.
The only guys to not get turned into vampires are Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, right. There you go. Right. And Eddie Murphy does play a vampire in
Vampire in Brooklyn.
Vampire in Brooklyn. Yeah.
I thought we were never ever going to talk about that movie ever.
There we go. We just everything. God. We start with Diggstown.
Murphy's we got. Listen, we've already talked about coming to America. Like we can talk about Eddie Murphy and the highs and lows of that man's career. Like because that man is capable of such highs and such crap. It's unlike. I mean, his hills and valleys are just.
I know we're not talking bad about Pluto Nash. No, I'm just kidding.
Is that the one that cost? Is that the one that cost him the Oscar? Because he was. Because was it Dreamgirls?
That futuristic one. Yeah. So that's probably his. If I'm thinking about it, that's probably his first like movie that didn't do well, I think, and that's probably his first like non. I don't know what the other rated R. I don't think they're all rated R, but it was like his non. I'm Eddie Murphy type movie. You know what I mean? Where it's like because I don't know his filmography, but it's around that. It's early '90s, and I think it's like.
Can I give you my Eddie Murphy?
Go ahead.
I want to give you my Eddie Murphy hot take. You ready?
Okay.
Beverly Hills Cop 2 is better than Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, they're all good. Yeah, I wouldn't say they're all. Three's not. Four's the one that they did last year is not bad.
Right.
Three.
I heard it was okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talked about Cobra Kai. I love everything they do when they're like, let's bring these old characters back, and I'm like, yeah. What made Top Gun? We'll just call it Top Gun 2. What made it work is that they could have touched it in the 80s and they didn't. And obviously, because whatever Tom Cruise takes, he still looks young. So it just works. And I thought, Cobra Kai really started that, right? Where it's like, oh man, this is great. We can kind of get our childhood back. And then, I think, Beverly Hills Cop is part of that. They tried it with Coming to America too. It just doesn't, some classics need to stay classics.
You know what I want?
Like Diggstown. I'm just kidding.
I want Last Starfighter. You can remake it or give me a sequel. I don't care. Either one. I want more Last Starfighter. That's what I want. So either way. Lou, it's getting late where you are, my friend. Dude, thank you so much for coming in and coming in. You're in your house. I'm in my house. We're in our, whatever. Dude, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about your book, which I loved. And then this movie, which is still like, I still got a soft spot for it. It's like, you said Diggstown. I was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, no, you should. I mean, we had the best our era was the best era, and we should celebrate it. Even if stuff doesn't hold up, it's not, maybe it's not supposed to. So it does it did what it did, does what it does. And so I'm fine with that. And I always come back on, talk Creed 1, 2, and 3. So we're good.
Oh, no, my friend. Your new mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go find us one more person so we can do Iron Eagle. I'm not even kidding. I'm down. We're talking about it. Buddy, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap here at Historians of the Movies podcast. Thank you so very much to our guest, Lou Moore, for coming in and talking about this movie, talking about your book. Lou, thank you so very, very much. Thank you to my cut man, Fletcher Powell, for being here, for producing this show. Fletch, thanks. It's always nice to know that you're in my corner. And most of all, thank you to all of you for continuing to come in and listening to this pod, share it with your friends, and helping it grow. So thank you so very, very much. It's summertime. It's movie season. We've got a bunch of pods coming up to you. New pods drop every Thursday, sometimes Wednesday nights. So stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. Ciao for now. Bye.